Memorial Hospital is functioning right now on the inside. We have the highest utilization of top hospitals in this market. We also have the largest share of high acuity patients. We are seeing the sickest patients in Chicago, and they're coming from longer and longer distances to be treated here. We also provide a larger portion of community care, i.e. Northwestern Memorial Hospital is very much a community hospital in Chicago to a much greater extent than any of our academic affiliates across the country. We need to continue to invest in this highest acuity care. When we look at our cardiovascular, transplant, neurosciences, and oncology programs, we're completely tapped on space. And the wait times to get in to see our physicians are growing and growing. And so we have to do something, and the only place that we can really do beds that can treat the highest acuity patients is on this campus. We won't be building a large enough building to do it all. We will be building a building that will become part of the ecosystem that you already see here. And so I'm going to talk a bit about how that full ecosystem will change with this building. We're already working diligently to come up with ways to utilize our beds at higher and higher rates, but there is no efficiency that we can deliver that'll overcome the number of beds that we have to add. And then finally, the adjacency to the Feinberg School of Medicine for our future growth is really critical. Discovery to delivery is happening faster and faster in healthcare. The faster that we can take research from the academic mission and get it to the bedside, the faster patients are able to get the benefits of all of the research that our clinicians are doing. So what does that all mean for this campus? Well, it means about 1.2 million square feet of space that Charlie will talk about in the new tower. It means more than 200 inpatient beds, and it means 20 new operating rooms, not just in the new tower, but also in the existing buildings. We also need to continue to attract top talent. For us, in our academic mission, that's incredibly important. Right now, our operating rooms will be out of space by 2038, and our surgeons won't have the space they need to do the surgeries that need to happen. And we don't have beds to get our emergency department patients into, which is really why we hear the complaints about our emergency department. It's that we need to put the patient in a bed, and we don't have a bed, so they're boarding in our emergency department. We also know that innovation is moving faster and faster in healthcare, and so this new tower and the movement across all of our buildings is going to give us the ability to keep pace with innovation and technology. There are going to be a number of things happening across this campus in parallel to this building being built. We can't wait for this tower to add beds. The emergency department can't wait, and our surgical capacity can't wait. So we are actually in the process right now of adding 60 beds within what's called our Galter Pavilion by moving outpatient care off this campus as we grow. So you may have heard about our building in Old Irving Park. You may have heard about a building that's going to open in Bronzeville in September. These are continued efforts for us to take outpatient care closer to where our patients live and work in the community, rather than bringing them to Streeterville for outpatient care. Outpatient care is something that we can continue to move off this campus and or grow off this campus closer to where folks live. However, we can't do that with the beds and with the surgical capacity. And so we will now go in, we'll add some more beds in Galter, and we are also going to move all of our lab functions out of our existing buildings into what we call the Olson Pavilion on this campus. That's going to give us room to add 10 operating rooms before the new tower even opens. In parallel, we will build a new building that'll be focused on cancer services. Right now, our cancer services exist across 5 buildings. So if you are getting oncology care here, you may move across 3 to 5 buildings in the course of that care. And that's just not the right experience, but it's also the byproduct of the way that we've had to sort of grow over time. And so strategically, this building will give us a place to consolidate all of oncology, except for our women's oncology program that'll stay in this building, into one location. It'll drastically improve patient care, patient ease. It means there will be parking in the same building where oncology patients are being treated. And that's a patient population that needs as much convenience as we can deliver to them. Once we move oncology into this new tower, We will then have the ability to grow our cardiovascular services in our existing Galter Pavilion. We'll grow our transplant services in our existing Arcus Pavilion and our neurosciences program in the Lavin Pavilion. Those are the 4 programs that have been identified to continue to grow on this campus, while many of our other programs, while growing on this campus in existing buildings that the market may have available, will also grow in the community. So that's a bit about how we've been thinking about the entire campus. So in this room, we'll spend a lot of time tonight talking about the new tower itself, because that obviously is the very visible change on the campus. But this is a bit to help people understand that this building will be about oncology, but it's really enabling neuro, cardiovascular, and transplant services to also grow in place. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Charlie, who will take you through the new tower.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charlie Quatier. I'm a vice president in the Planning and Construction Department for Northwestern. And I'm going to share as much detail as we have at this point on the new tower. I do want to point out, I know there's going to be a lot of questions and answers, and we've purposely engaged the community very early in this process. So as you ask questions, try not to be frustrated that the answer might be, we don't know right now, and we're going to be spending the next 12 months doing that, because it is very early in the process. A project of this size, there are a ton of departments within Northwestern that are involved, but the ones that will be interfacing the most with the community would be the Planning and Construction Department, External Affairs, Clinical Operations, and Property Operations. We've chosen Perkins & Will to be the architect for this project. Late last fall, we awarded it to them after a competitive process that involved 10 different firms. Perkins & Will is really best-in-class architectural firm. A lot of healthcare experience, a lot of Chicago experience, and a very storied Chicago history, which was really important to us. We've already chosen a contractor, even though we have not started schematic design yet. This is going to be a very complex project, and having that partner on board early is really not just a nice to have, it's a necessity. And so that's Power Construction, who, again, best in class, a lot of Chicago experience, a lot of high-rise experience, and a lot of experience in this neighborhood. And they have a joint venture partner, Ujamaa Construction. So as Gina mentioned, the building's about 1.2 million square feet. We're targeting around 600 parking spaces. We're still honing in on that number as we run all of our models for the demand and traffic the building will generate, but that's the current plan. At this stage, we are complete with programming, and I'll get into a little more detail on exactly what that means in a couple slides. And we're just about to kick off actual schematic design in September. As you have likely noticed, we've had some activity on the site over the past couple months, conducting exploratory activities, soil boring, soil samples, et cetera. Those activities will continue for the next several months. And then the other big thing, Illinois is a certificate of need state, so any large construction project that we want to do over a certain dollar threshold requires approval from the state. This project is so large that it will have multiple CONs, but the first one is really for the design, and we just submitted that at the end of June, and our hearing with the state is on September 25th. Do want to point out, this project is fully self-funded by Northwestern. We are not looking for and will not take any public assistance on the project, and we are ready to go. And then, additional benefit to the city of Chicago, this project will support 3,000 to 4,000 union construction jobs. And then once the building opens, 400 to 600 new permanent jobs for the community. So I mentioned we just finished programming. A typical real estate developer, condos, office space, would look at this and just try to maximize the site and make the most profit that they could from their development. That's not how it works in healthcare. We start with what do we need in the building to care for the patients. And so we've been spending the last several months with all of our clinical operations teams and leadership, physicians, determining that. How many exam rooms do we need? How many patient rooms do we need? How many ORs do we need? And that's a very lengthy process that we just wrapped up. Now that we know that, that's what drives what we design on that property. And so that's the next stage. Like I said, that begins in September, where we'll actually start, drawing lines on floor plans of all the things that we have determined that we need in the building. So what is in the building? What is the programming? The building has an oncology focus. A lot of oncology services are in the building. Not all oncology services are in the building, and the building is not just oncology services either. But Gina mentioned inpatient beds. We have a range right now of 226 to 314 beds. It will have 5 ORs with the capability for another 5 in the future. A full imaging complement, so MRI, CT, PET CT, X-ray, and ultrasound. Several ambulatory clinics, again, with a focus on oncology. Several infusion clinics with a focus on oncology. And then all the support functions that go along to support those departments, big ones being lab, pharmacy, supportive oncology. And then we will also have a retail presence in the building and shell space for future development. So as we think about design, and again, very early, there's 5 key concepts that are really going to drive the decisions that we make from here on out. The first one, you can argue what is the center of campus today, and probably have a couple different ideas depending on your opinion. But what is clear is when this building is done, whatever that center of gravity is on campus is going to change. This building is going to be very impactful to the campus, and we want to really think about that in a thoughtful way. Next, this building is going to have fantastic views, and we really want to capitalize on those views for patients that are going to be here for hours and days and months, and then the staff that are taking care of those patients as well. Connectivity is very important on this campus. We have 6 buildings that are all connected by bridge or tunnel. 6 buildings is really one hospital, and those bridges and tunnels are really important to maintaining those operations and having everything connected. Human experience is very important, both on the exterior of the building and the interior, again, for not just the patients, but their families that are visitors, as well as the caregivers. And then flexibility and adaptability, doing our best to design this building in a way that it can respond to a future that none of us can really predict. So the site context here, it's the VAA site and then the VAB site, which is smaller. For our project, we're really only talking about developing the western 2/3 of the VAA site for this project. The east third and the VAB site really won't be developed as part of this project. But as we go through the PD process, we do want to understand that future development, what are those bulk and density requirements that we can build in. For a little more detailed look at the site plan here, again, you'll see on the purple, that's the project. That's our tower that we're proposing to build. The blue is not developed at this point. It is a future clinical development. We don't know what that would be or when that would happen. When you think about the center of gravity on campus, Fairbanks and Erie becomes a really important corner with this building. And so you'll see we want to provide some relief from the property line and have a small public plaza in front of the building there. The pedestrian and vehicular entrance really makes the most sense off of Erie. And so that's where a drop-off would be and a service entrance off of Huron. And you'll see in some of the images I'm going to show, again, really not wanting to build lot line to lot line straight up in a block or a rectangle like Alderman Hopkins was talking about previously. Bridge connections. Again, very important for our buildings to be connected for clinical operations. So we plan a bridge to go across Fairbanks that would connect the new tower to Feinberg. And that would be on the 2nd floor, an extension of the public concourse that's been so successful for the hospital and the community with the retail and restaurants. We want to extend that to this building. What's different here is we cannot build a tunnel under Fairbanks. There's a very large sewer line that runs under there that makes a tunnel not feasible. And so the bridge over Fairbanks is really going to be a 2-story bridge. The 2nd story is, again, the extension of that public concourse. The 3rd story would be back of house for patient transport, materials, supplies, staff, et cetera. And then this building gives us our first opportunity to try to connect to Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. We've never been far enough east with our campus to do that. We are just far enough to attempt to try to connect a bridge to Shirley Ryan Ability Lab with this project. We're still working on the details of that. It is not very easy, but it is our goal to try to make that happen. Building massing, so again, very early, but I just want to point out a few things here. Again, this is not a design, this is just a massing concept. But you'll see in the first image on the left, that's the corner, you're looking at the corner of Fairbanks and Erie. Again, providing some relief, some public plaza, so we're not just lot line to lot line with these buildings. The next thing I want to point out, you'll notice this is a podium tower concept. So the first 3 floors of this building, we call podium, and it's a little larger, and it houses some of those clinical functions that need these huge floor plates. So imaging, surgery, those types of things. And then above that, the tower, if you will, has the clinics, the infusion, and the inpatient beds. And then the third thing I want to point out here is, I mentioned trying to maximize views, and the shape of this building is really starting to be crafted to take advantage of not just the views from Lake Michigan in multiple directions, but the views of the city skyline in general. So mention those design drivers. Those are some of the things that are starting to inform the massing of this building.
Where's the parking?
We're still working on where the parking fits into the stack. So the PD, the zoning process here, this project will be a plan development. And so that'll be a full review with the city, continue to work with Alderman Hopkins' office and all of you in making sure we get this right. One interesting thing about this site, so, when the old VA Lakeside Hospital was demolished over a decade ago, it was demolished to grade. There is a 3-story basement below ground that still exists. And that image you see on the bottom is a rendering that our structural engineer did of what that looks like underground. It's basically a upside down birthday cake. That is going to be extremely challenging from a construction perspective to excavate and get out. And so we are planning on submitting for an excavation and demolition permit ahead of the PD process continuing. We're trying to see if we can get this by late next year. The building permit for the actual building, obviously that cannot be issued by the city until the whole plan development and zoning process is through, but we wanted to be forthright with the community that we are going to be trying to do that ahead of the PD process. The demo and excavation permit does not require any PD approvals. And then in the spring of 27 is likely when we would be starting construction of the actual tower if the PD process is successful. So next steps, I mentioned we're beginning schematic design in September. We're going to be continuing to work with the city on the plan development process and continue to work with the Alderman's office on partnering with all of you to make sure we're properly engaging the community. And you will continue, like I said, to see exploratory activity out on the site as we continue to learn more about the soil and the lovely surprise that awaits us below grade. That is all we had for tonight. I know there's probably a lot of questions and we are happy to answer the ones that we can. There's microphones if you guys want to line up so everybody can hear the question.
I guess my biggest concern is going to be the new traffic that's going to come about because of the new buildings. If you're going to add 400 to 600 new employees, they need parking along with patients, and they need entrance and egress from the area. Currently, I live on McClurg, and it's a nightmare to come home in the evening because the traffic is an abomination. There's no one out there to try to stop people from just parking in the middle of the intersection until they can go. So
Yeah.
I don't know if there's ideas about this yet.
We don't have ideas yet because of how early we are. We know that it's very important and we're going to go through the ringer with the community, with the CDOT, and they're going to have plenty of ideas on how to improve it as well. And we have a good history of working with CDOT on projects like Old Irving Park and Bronzeville that had similar concerns, not at this scale, obviously. And we have worked successfully with them to implement whatever solutions we can to help with that.
Okay. One other question has to do with the numbers of beds that will be put in the new building. That doesn't always mean that you're going to keep the number of beds in Feinberg or Galter or Lavin at the same that they are today.
We will not be decreasing the number of beds, I can promise you that.
Okay. That was...
As we look at how things restack for what specialty goes in Feinberg and Galter and Prentice versus this new tower, I bet that's going to change several times before the building opens. But there are no beds closing in our existing pavilion.
Okay.
I just had a question about the eastern 1/3 that you have slated for future development. Assuming that development is maybe 10 years down the road, what, in the interim, what would that 1/3 look like?
We are grappling with that right now.
Right.
That's one of our...
I live at 680 Lakeshore Drive, so
Yeah.
I'd be coming out looking at that.
We're aware the
I'm
community
curious.
is going to really want to have some sort of input into that. We're exploring a few creative ideas that would have something that's aesthetically pleasing to look at.
Thank you.
Yep, over there.
My name is Becky Critch. I am secretary of the 680 Tower Residence Condominium Homeowners Association. First of all, I want to thank Alderman Hopkins and SOAR for bringing us together and for representing the Streeterville community. I also want to thank our representatives from Northwestern Medicine to share this information with us this evening. I too have some questions about that eastern portion of the vacant lot. I do think it would benefit the entire community as well as those who visit, those who work at Northwestern in the hospital, as well as those at Shirley Ryan, whether they work there or are patients there, for there to be parkland there. We currently see lots of patients being wheeled up and down that block on McClurg Court. And I think that it would be a huge miss to have only a small bit of parkland over on Fairbanks versus putting it along the eastern end. So that's just something that I added. It wasn't one of my submitted questions. What I would like to formally ask, though, is that our condominium association is the only residential association that borders directly on the vacant lot where this new building and that future building will be constructed. And this question is really for Alderman Hopkins and for SOAR. How do you intend to include the homeowners of this association, the 680 Tower Association, because we are uniquely situated in this neighborhood as it relates to the build out of this vacant lot? Thank you.
Yeah, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks, which the audio came on at some point, I'm not sure if this was captured or not, so I'll reiterate that we are going to have a continued dialogue and an ongoing process with smaller breakout groups, right? So obviously the Homeowners Association at 680 will be the #1 breakout group that we engage with, and for a variety of reasons. The top concern is, of course, the demolition of the underground structure. That's going to cause some inconvenience, and 680 is going to be hit harder than anybody else by that. There's no way to go through that process without some dust and some noise. So you are going to have different seats at the table as this process unfolds, not just for the demolition, but for the long-term impact of the design. And we're a step ahead of you on the thinking that the eastern part, depending on how long we think it might be available for some type of community benefit, we're going to have that conversation. We're going to insist that in some way, to be determined, that is useful and beneficial to the community for a period of time, a limited period of time, of course. And I want to point out that SOAR and the River North Residents Association both have experience with this, because from the institution's perspective, if they give you something too nice, you get really attached to it, right? And then 5 years go by and it's pulled away from you and you're like, no, you can't do that, right? So we have to address that at the outset. This is a mutual agreement where if we can come to some concept that's going to work, that everybody understands it will have an expiration date on it. And if we agree at the outset, then we can go forward with something that people can use in the meantime while the institution decides what is the appropriate use for that. And again, 680 will be a much greater stakeholder in that process than the rest. So count on seeing a lot of me and my team over the next couple of weeks as we go forward with this.
I do want to mention too about the demolition. You know, we're not a developer whose offices are in like the West Loop. Our patient care is happening in this community. There's critical research happening in the NU buildings. No one is more committed to having a demolition process that is as least disruptive as possible than we are, in addition to the residents. Yeah.
I've been a resident of Streeterville for over 30 years, and I can honestly say that the Northwestern complex, both the university and the hospital, have been great neighbors, and they've always been extremely responsive to any complaints or issues that we've had. However, over the last few years, we've noticed there's a increase in the decibel level, the noise that comes from your ventilation systems. And in the past, when people in my building have called, once it was a loud squealing noise was due to a ball bearing that needed oiling, simple. Another time it was a fan in Prentice that needed replacing. This year, you know, I've called to no avail and don't get a response. So my concern is, as you add to the noise load, and the complex here is surrounded by residential buildings, what are you going to do to ameliorate the level of sound?
Yeah, obviously this early in design, I couldn't share any specific technicalities of mitigation strategies, but I can't say, you know, newer buildings are generally quieter than older buildings. I'd probably want to get a little more information on some of the other buildings that are noisy, but it's something we'll definitely take into account.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Hirsch Cohen. Sorry. I'm the president of the 680 North Lakeshore Tower Condo Association. Major concerns have to do with questions that have already been asked: parking, noise level, green space, traffic, etc. It was my understanding from a gentleman's agreement when the city and Northwestern came up with the idea of fencing in the property, that there was a commitment. I can't find any documentation. There was a commitment for some form of green space. Hopefully you will comply with that understanding. It sounds like it might be in the works. Secondly, I'm a former hospital CEO and hospital consultant, and I've written CONs. So I have some CON questions, if you can. Number one, what's the occupancy rate in the 3 major services that are being considered? Secondly, what's your market share in the greater Chicago area? And thirdly, will you be funding the project through bonds of any sort?
Unfortunately, I'm not the right person to answer any 3 of those questions. I'm just the construction guy, but we can follow back up with that information. I'm not aware of any agreements that are in place with the city from when the VAA lot was purchased over a decade ago. But obviously, anything, you know, that we're required to do, we're going to do. And we also want to incorporate a little more green space into this building than the rest of the campus has.
In your CON application, there was no mention of the regional and hospital occupancy rates and market share. Hopefully that will be presented during that process. I would also like to suggest, before we go any further, that between the SOAR organization and the Alderman's office, we form the committees that would be involved in the ongoing dialogue. That would be very helpful so we can get that underway before the actual process begins.
Thank you.
I'm Neil Hirsch, no relation. I have a suggestion and a few questions. Alderman Hopkins, I think you should run for mayor. That's my suggestion. The traffic on the north-south, I don't know how you're going to solve it. It's so backed up now. Adding, 2,000 people a day, whether they park or they, it's like mission impossible. The second thing is, there's two more things. The noise of the sirens is, you got to do something about that. I don't know how you're going to do it, but you got to do something about it. In the previous construction, the staging sucked. I mean, they were these big trucks, dump trucks with stuff parked on all over the place, and they're just waiting. I understand that there's, they have to go someplace, but there were too many of them for too long a time, and maybe that is part of what your privy is.
Yeah, so, one of the reasons we got a contractor on board this early is to plan ahead for all that stuff and have a really good plan in place so we can communicate to the community exactly what is going to happen. There are going to be disruptions, and there are going to be days where somebody didn't do what they said they were going to do, but it's our commitment that we're going to do the best we can.
Except you have to have somebody on site to oversee that, and that wasn't the case that I've ever seen.
Well, we have a whole team dedicated to just this project on this campus.
I'm talking about where the staging is taking place, where those trucks are.
Yeah.
Okay, because that wasn't the case before.
Your previous two questions, I know you said traffic, and again, I don't have any answers on traffic.
Noise.
And noise.
Ambulances.
Sorry?
Noise, particularly ambulances.
Okay, so
I live at the 680. I live on the 22nd floor.
Yeah.
I still hear those ambulances all the time.
So I'm not sure this answers your question, but I do want to point it out. This building will not have an emergency department. The emergency department is not moving, is not part of this project. And so ambulance traffic in general, this building should not impact any ambulance traffic whatsoever.
It's the existing.
No, I know that. I wanted to use that opportunity to point that out because we saw those questions come in through the thing. Yes.
Hello, my name is Milena and also a resident of 680. So obviously we appreciate all the information you are sharing with us, and Osor and Alderman for putting this together. In regards of the how many floors, do you have any information? How many floors is going to be that tower?
We haven't landed on the exact number of floors yet. If I can give you guys a reference point, it will likely be somewhere in the vicinity of Lavin in terms of building height, the Lavin Pavilion.
Okay, so that's at what point we will know more information in regards of how many floors?
Yeah, in the next several months as we actually begin design, that information will hone in on those things.
And coming back to the green areas, as everybody knows in today's day how beneficial are not only for the patients, but the community. The community that we live around here is a lot of buildings, and more buildings and traffic. And we deserve, I think, a little space in that for Northwestern to have in consideration the patients, the families, the residents, for an area that has some green that the community and the patients can use. I would bring that to the table in case that is still in the process.
Yep, understood. I mean, I think Alderman Hopkins said it really good. It's a delicate dance to make sure that, whatever we provide now, it's clear that that's not going to be there forever, but we understand that's a primary concern.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Emmanuel Kamadi. I'm one of the neurology resident physicians here at Northwestern. Thank you, Alderman Hopkins, members of SOAR, residents of Streeterville for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I echo a lot of the same concerns that the residents of Streeterville, residents of SOAR discussed in terms of parking, traffic, noise, greenery. I do want to talk a little bit about another concern that's personal to the resident physicians' hearts and kind of just twofold. So, I mean, I agree, Western is a top-notch institution, and in order to further that plan and that development, that means expanding some of the spaces, allowing for better wait times, allowing for better innovation of Northwestern in general. But with that comes staffing concerns from where the resident physicians lie. Myself, along with many of my other colleagues, are typically working upwards of 70, 80 hours a week, oftentimes working night shifts or 24-hour shifts. And currently across the country, you know, there's been changes in resident education, resident support at various other top institutions such as Harvard and Mass General, Stanford, and University of Pennsylvania. And with that specifically talking about unionship. Recently here at Northwestern in the last year, the residents became a unionized organization, and we are currently in the contract negotiations with Northwestern and McGaw themselves. And while it's wonderful to see that Western is putting in such a substantial financial proposal into this building and that they're wanting to fund this substantially on their own, it kind of feels a little bit disheartening to also see that it doesn't always seem like they're putting the same benefit into contract negotiations with the union members of ourselves. As mentioned, we've been negotiating for about the past year or so, and while we are making progress, I think that there can still be some work to be done. And so again, it is very heartening to see the financial obligation that Northwestern is footing by putting their investment into this building. I just want to raise the same concerns that I wish that they would put some of those same obligations and investments into the residents who will ultimately be staffing these buildings. I know ultimately I'm not going to be a resident forever, but I'm not just speaking for myself right now, I'm speaking for the future generations that are to come that are responsible for caring for both Northwestern, the residents of Streeterville, the residents of Chicago, and the greater good of Illinois.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I also want to echo what my colleague Emmanuel said. I'm also with the Committee of Interns and Residents who have been bargaining for over a year now. I also want to emphasize another point that there's been repeated rejections in our bargaining about things that would improve resident wellness and well-being. And that's something that ultimately will improve patient care in the long run as well. McGaw has been rejecting proposals around fatigue mitigation, mental health supplemental insurance, and just things that would boost resident mental health. And these are the folks who are, working really, really hard to provide patient care in the Chicago area. And so just anything that improves resident mental health, resident wellness is ultimately really great for patient care as well. So having the same energy towards building beds to expand patient care, I think really taking that same energy and putting it into contract negotiations will have a huge impact to the community at large. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jim Gower. I live in the neighborhood. I noticed that the footprint of the proposed tower is similar in size to the parking garage across Erie. Has there been any discussion of developing that site instead?
We don't, Gina, correct me, we don't own that site.
Has there been any discussion of buying it?
Yes, unsuccessfully.
Really? So that has been pursued?
Not. Charlie's right. We don't own those structures. We, I think, would love to own them someday. However, that day has not come for us. In addition to that, the connectivity to this building based on this particular location is really important because we're going to split our surgical platform.
Okay.
Thanks. So, but we would love to own that garage someday. That would be nice.
Yeah, I'm Ron Grace. I live at 680. I'll be looking out my window at what you're doing. Looking forward to it. How does the old Rehabilitation Institute building fit into this plan that you also own?
We do not own that. The university, I believe, owns the old rehabilitation building.
The university owns it, rather
yes.
than the hospital. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hi,
yes.
I'm Jean Sola. I also live at 680. We're all here from 680. And as my neighbor said, yes, we'll be watching this entire process from the get-go. But getting back to green space again, are you intending to chop down the beautiful mature trees that line Erie Street and Huron Street in the process of construction?
We also love the trees. I want to be very clear about that. And my executive leaders point out those trees to me every day that I see them. We are going to do our best to make sure those trees survive construction. I cannot promise that they will survive construction. I can tell you that if you don't believe the sincerity that we want to share those trees, the amount of money we have to pay the city if those trees do not survive is staggering. And so we are also financially incentivized to try to make those trees survive.
That's terrific. And I would urge you to contact the Morton Arboretum, who is just a wonderful expertise in saving trees, especially during construction. And the Museum of Contemporary Art saved their trees on that land when they built. So it can be done, and it can be done successfully. So I really hope that that's the case.
Thank you.
Hi. I don't live at 680, but I live in the neighborhood. And I'm thrilled that you're expanding Northwestern Hospital. Unfortunately, I've been a patient in the emergency room many times, and it is so overcrowded, and you spend hours in the waiting room, and I know this is really going to help tremendously. So I just wanted to add a positive note.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the ED wait times are very complex in terms of root cause, but one of those root causes is a patient is sitting in the ED because there's not a bed for them to go to because we're so crowded here. And so there are multiple ways, even though we're not touching the ED with this project, that we can improve on that.
Hi, I'm Eileen Bodie with 680 as well. Question, you're going to start construction in the spring of 27, is that correct?
We're trying to start demolition and excavation at the end of 26, and then the building construction would begin in spring of 27. That's our goal.
And then what is the projected timeline to complete the building? So how many years or months will it be actually in construction?
So from excavation and demolition to end of construction is probably every bit of 4 years.
4 years.
Yes.
A lot of dirt and dust.
We will.
How much of that is foreign shell versus interior?
Probably half. So, you know, the dust, so to speak, that risk would be there for about half the project until the building's enclosed. Any other questions? All right, I think I'll turn it. Oh, okay.
Anne Marie Flores, I'm also a resident of 680, the Tower residence. We're very well represented. Thank you to Northwestern, SOAR, and the Alderman for this. I'm very curious about what has been considered regarding security for the building. Crime has increased a great deal since the Shirley Ryan building opened. There was an individual that was shot dead in cold blood just in front of our building in that halfway between us and Feinberg. And there's been, I think, about a year of increased presence of security, which has been great, and I think that's helped a lot. But when you've got construction happening, lots of empty space, or lots of venues to get in and out of a construction, what is your plan for security?
Yeah. I'll talk about this a bit broadly, and then Charlie can hone in on it for the project itself. I also have, in addition to real estate and construction in my division, I have security. We hear you loud and clear on the security concerns. I think we've very much noticed both inside our buildings and outside our buildings the increase in crime. And we made a strategic decision several years ago that we will never be able to stop everything bad that happens here, but we will know who did it, and we will figure out how to send a message that if you do it in Streeterville, you're going to get caught. So we've added thousands of cameras, both to the perimeter of our campus and to the interiors of our campus. we've elevated our leadership team within security. They have realigned all of our cameras so that they are able to, both from our security operations center, track from camera to camera. We're now connected to the city of Chicago so that they can immediately gain access as they need to, so that we can connect fluidly between our systems and their resources. In addition to that, we've started to reduce the number of entry points we have in our buildings. I think you'll see that with this new facility. Historically, we've had people coming in lots of directions, and we'll probably avoid that in the future. We've added private off-duty law enforcement that you've probably noticed with their green lights on in the neighborhood. That will continue. We think it's really important that our employees come and go at all kinds of hours, and they should feel safe walking, and you all should feel safe walking as well. And that's something that we can continue to do to help this community. Chicago police have also been very, very helpful. They know that a lot of issues come into our emergency department, and we are getting incredible response from them. I can't say enough about how great law enforcement's been. So you're going to continue to see that both during construction and after. We have already doubled down on our security resources, because again, we can't always stop it from happening, but we're going to be part of the solution to ensure that the world knows you can't do it here, because we're going to catch it. We also have a number of things during construction in Charlotte.
Yeah, so, over the last couple of years, we've built a new building in Old Irving Park. We've built a new building in Bronzeville, and we've experienced security issues during construction on both of those projects where construction, material was stolen, very organized operation, and so we've learned the hard way as well. We now have, on both of those projects, we went into a operation where we had 24/7 security dedicated to just securing the construction site, barriers that were unscalable. We have cameras, a lot of cameras on the construction site as well, and so we'll look to employ some of those strategies here.
When you get a gunshot in the emergency room, a gangbang or some, I assume that a lot of the friends of or family of that gunshot victim will come around, and then the opposite gang, if that's the case may be, and that's a lot of, I assume, of the gunshots. Do you have a special alert system for that?
We often know that we have an inbound coming in. We have what's called a GSW process. It's a gunshot wound process, but it's really any victim of violent crime. We do have a very detailed process around it. We lock the buildings down. Security immediately increases its presence around the emergency department. In most cases, Chicago police are also here. That patient goes under an alias so that they can't be located within our buildings, and we aren't letting anyone sort of have any kind of movement within the facilities. Our goal is to immediately disperse people home if we have an issue. So we do have very tight protocols in place around that. Mm-hmm.
Hi, name's Lou Nashner, also 680 Tower resident and one of the board members as well. And we live on the northwest corner. So half of our unit faces right into the open area. And I guess the question I have is a little bit more detailed. You're going to add 200-300 beds, and that means patients and their families. 600 cars. I forget the number you had for the number of new employees. If you look at the site, your choices for where to have the entrance to the parking are pretty darn limited. If you put them on Huron, going the wrong way. So you have to put them on your area, I suppose. And that's the entrance to the emergency room. And since Erie is already clogged up, the ambulances coming down Erie, have their sirens screaming literally until they get in the door. I just think adding this load where the building is, it's going to be a traffic disaster. I mean, the streets are kind of narrow. Fairbanks backs up, so, and people, you know, sit in the intersection and block it. I really wonder whether, you know, that's going to take some real thought. And I don't, you know, and I think, you know, it's going to have a big impact on us because we have to get in and out of our parking garage, and we have to go down Erie and then turn on to McClurg. So I hope you're realistic about that, because it's going to be a mess for your people as well as us if you're not.
Yep, we have a traffic consultant on the team. We'll be doing a full traffic study. The city's got to approve that traffic study, and as part of that study, any improvements that they feel we should make, we're going to be required to make. So, all right, if there's no other questions, I'm going to turn it over to Alderman Hopkins to close out.
Sure. Yeah, staying on the topic of excessive siren noise, I was a resident of Streeterville for 20 years. Can speak as personally on this subject as anyone in this room. It's a topic that we've advocated for many, many years to try and get a reduction. We have the loudest sirens manufactured by the equipment companies here in Chicago, 20 decibels louder than they use in New York City. It's not necessary, you know, and I've been on this campaign for years now. Surprisingly, I've got some support now from the firefighters union. It turns out that retired firefighters have a much higher rate of hearing loss, and there's no necessary proof that it's because of exposure to the excessive sirens, but logic would infer that there's a connection there. So I did pass an ordinance a few years ago to allow for a discretionary termination of the siren as the equipment approaches the emergency room. They used to be required to have the siren on until they hit that loading bay. And now they can turn it off at their discretion if they choose. I wanted to make it mandatory for the last 1,000 feet. We couldn't get that. Some do and some don't. So that was a slight improvement, but there's really so much more that needs to be done on this topic. The institutions have been partners because, you know, it affects the quality of life. It affects the quality of patient care. People need to get rest. You know, they are awoken at 3 a.m. by an excessive siren right outside their window. It's unacceptable. So that's something goes above and beyond this particular project we're talking about, but that is something that we are going to continue to push for common sense changes. On the topic of traffic, you know, Streeterville is ground zero for traffic congestion in the city, and it has gotten worse. I think we've all observed that in the recent years. This project can be used as leverage to get the Department of Transportation to come to the table with potential solutions. There's some things that can be done that could potentially be helpful, and I'll point to one that is just a few years ago. We widened Mies van der Rohe between Chicago Avenue and Pearson just by a couple of feet. And that was enough to allow for a signal turning lane. That had a chain reaction effect, particularly in the PM rush hour, of relieving traffic trying to get to Lakeshore Drive. It did help somewhat. So that's an example of a engineered design solution that can make a difference. We're going to be looking at some other things as part of this project. We need to do the study. We actually have a campus master plan that's recently been updated. So there's some suggestions there. And now that we're going to bring CDOT into this process as part of this traffic study, there's some things we will look for to see if some improvements can be made, because the current conditions are, you know, as we all know, untenable. Another question that I wanted to respond to, who was the gentleman that wanted to know a bit more about the certificate of need? Okay, sir, Scott Zomek from the Government Relations Department. Scott, raise your hand. You guys get together afterwards and exchange contact information, and he can respond to that for that hearing coming up on September 25th. So with that, again, thank you all. These are some good questions, good feedback. Again, this is the beginning of a lengthy process of community involvement, and I hope you'll all continue to stay involved. We have your email addresses, so stay tuned for the next update. Thank you very much.
Good.